Now we'll welcome Mayline. She will be talking about following those who follow seabirds. Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. So it's my pleasure to be here today after 3 years of studying you. And so today, you, for me, will not hear a presentation on birds, but on seabird researchers. So yeah, I'm a PhD student at the Science, Technology, Innovation Studies department at the University of Edinburgh. And I'm doing a PhD now, which I'm wrapping up about the geography of marine ornithologists, mobilities to the fields in the Arctic area, mostly. So just to explain to you what science and technologies are, it is an interdisciplinary field of research in social sciences, which simply asks how is science made, how are technologies made, and what are the consequences of science made in a way and not in a different way. So its core principle is that science is a social activity. Then I'm more specialized in the field of geography of science, which asks where is science done, why is it done there and not somewhere else, and how does science vary from place to place. And so its core principle is that science is a situated activity. And so I observe those who observe seabirds. So yeah, to provide you some background about my field and my PhD, today I only have 12 minutes to present 3 years of research, so I'm going to focus on my key results, but feel free to reach out after if you want me to explain further this. So yeah, in my PhD, I'm wondering how ornithologists choosing or not choosing the location of the colonies they study. What are the underlying issues at stake behind the choice of a colony to study? Do researchers follow the birds? How do researchers manage to turn a seabird colony into a site for science? And how do they manage to come back over the years? So yeah, my case study is around the North Atlantic Arctic area where you have big issues of remoteness. And then I use a mixed method approach, which I'm going to explain to you now. So the principle of my mixed method approach is that as a geographer, I'm wondering where is science done and why is it done there. So for the where, I apply quantitative mapping and bibliometrics. For the why there, I did interviews and fieldwork with researchers. So for the where, just to provide you some explanation, so this is a co-authorship network of publications on the Atlantic basin. So you see that people tend to publish, you see clusters of people who publish more together. And if you put this on a map, I've done 3 time periods. You can see that there is an increasing internationalization and of collaborations on research on the Atlantic puffin far beyond the puffin breeding area. So that already sort of answers one of my questions. Do researchers follow the birds? Apparently not. And so why there? So I conducted interviews with 25 marine-ornithologists. Many of you are actually in the room now. And so we discussed your academic careers, the field sites you've been to, the logistics of fieldwork, the collaborations, the relationships with the birds, with the colonies, the routine and daily life in the fields, and the methods they use. And then I conducted 4 pieces of ethnographic fieldwork in the past 2 years. Here you see a map of the study sites I consider, either in interviews, in a case study I do on Sea-Track, or in fieldwork. So yeah, this is just to show you the 4 fieldwork I've done. So on Coimbra last year, in Boulogne-sur-Mer, which is an industrial harbor in France, last year too. And here in June, I was a scribe on the Puffin Rally. So we did several colonies across Iceland. And just last week, I was following some petrol work in the Westman Islands in Iceland. So as I join in the field, either as an observer or as a participant, I'm trying to compare work practices and really feeling the joys and challenges of seabird fieldwork, and to better understand what it is to be seabird researchers and make decisions in the field, and experience some of the struggles of fieldwork as well. So now I'm going to present you very briefly some of the key results from my study. So what makes a good field site? That is a very big question, and maybe if you think of the perfect field site, you think of a field site you can go to in the first place, a field site with many birds that you can access, that is not very expensive, that you can get the money to go there. So indeed, accessibility is, from my study, a key component of what makes a good field site and the field site you're going to go to. Accessibility is about the logistics, of course, because seabirds tend to breed on remote islands, steep cliffs, not always, but there's mostly remote areas. Funding, so it costs a lot of money to go to these places, so that's a big consideration. The human infrastructure that is required, so finding skilled people, skilled workers, or even local people that can help to access these places, and then at the colony are the birds even accessible. But what I found out is really that collaborations among researchers is a key feature of accessing field sites, and it happens across all these characteristics of what makes accessibility. What was interesting for me is that collaborations not only happens before fieldwork and after fieldwork, and during fieldwork, collaboration is not so prominent. So I tried to modelize something that a lot of discussions I had during the interviews, meaning that teams of researchers will tend to share the data they collect and make the most of our field visits, but they will not so much travel and visit each other fieldwork, which is quite interesting if you compare to other scientific disciplines. And so this is what I call capitalizing mobilities. So researchers, once they manage to negotiate the access to a field site, would tend to make this as their expertise, and that's how they belong in the scientific community. They know how to go to this place and collect as much data for colleagues. What's also important to consider is not only access, but something you cannot really quantify, which are emotions and the sense of adventure. It's really something that was brought up a lot in conversation, so now I'm going to show you some quotes from interview. They are all anonymized. So you have this person, Philippe, in France, and really was explaining that he chooses field site in Greenland based on access, but then he wants a sense of adventure. And Eric in Norway really talked to me about his favorite site in Svalbard, which is the most remote one because of the adventure side. And here, Arthur was talking about his supervisor and really saying that he has a real sense of adventure and he wants the challenging aspects of fieldwork. So yeah, I don't have time to really go into that, but you also have a gender and age bias in how are you choosing access or adventure. The second big result, and something I'm really focusing on, is the matter of temporalities and what I call genealogies, which is about the key issue of sustainability of field sites. So it's not only important to access a field, but to come back and do long-term monitoring over decades, but more importantly, to be able to justify that in the current academic system. And so this is something that Elias here, for instance, was saying, that monitoring is poorly funded because it's a long-term investment. And here Jan was really explaining that it's very difficult to justify this for a funder because you don't know when you start monitoring what you're going to collect. And so this is not how the research system works. But you, as here with pictures from Rust in Norway, you still have sites that are able to be sustained. And so it was really interesting for me to really focus on these stories and how researchers were able to maintain their field sites despite the academic system. And this is what I call negotiating immobility. So I've identified sort of 4 temporalities of field sites. One is field sites in the making. So when a team of researchers or just a researcher alone identifies an interesting colony to study, sometimes it can just be naturalist, as the group I joined in Boulogne-sur-Mer. So they are trying to attract researchers and trying to develop studies and make it into a field sites. Then the bigger group of sites that I came across is what I call uncertain sites. So sites that are studied, sometimes monitored, sometimes from a one-off study, but the researchers really don't know from a year to another if it's going to be able to be maintained and what is going to happen to these sites. Then you have the transmitted sites, which is a big case, for instance, with the CPOP program in Norway, that sites that exist for such a long time that, for instance, the researchers are already retiring and like appointing people to take over. And so then you would choose your field site because you're just getting a job to continue the monitoring there. And then you have the smaller case of sites, which is the long-term and sustained sites, which are not that many. And a big case here is, for instance, the Isle of May in Scotland. And so you don't have that many sites with a long-term monitoring that were able to be sustained. And then the last focus of my study are the disruptions of fieldwork and debates around the end of the fieldwork. We heard a lot of discussions about AI, for instance. And then I focused more on tracking. Here I took a slide from CTRAC and like how the research community was happy to welcome geolocators, and it's a lot. The term revolution of biologging happened a lot in the literature, but it also created debates. So here it's a paper. This is start of tracking studies. And so, yeah, you have publications from conservationists that were really worried about the divorcing of biologists from the field sites and that losing a biological field. And so it's something I've been wondering, are researchers really losing a biological field? What does that mean? Are researchers doing less fieldwork? And so I'm just showing you some quotes just to say that researchers are not doing less fieldwork, they're just doing fieldwork differently. Often it involves spending less time in the field and really industrializing fieldwork almost. And it's really interesting for me to hear the justifications of researchers as to why they continue doing fieldwork, even though it's getting more and more complicated to gather the resources. So Elisa here just saying like researchers love being outside, and if you use technologies that can collect data remotely, you'll be removing something that they love to do. Peter here is saying that it's really reassuring to go out with binoculars, notebook, and really feel around the colony. And here I have this quote from Michael Harris, with whom I did an interview, that just said, people go into the field because they like going into the field. I think it's a nice way of putting things. So yeah, to conclude, how you are choosing the colonies to study, well, maybe I'm not telling you something you don't know, but accessibility, funding, and personal encounters, so people who trust maybe advise you somewhere to go. But also collaborations and adventure play a big role in access to the colonies. So we have to consider collaborations as a way to capitalize on access to the field site and making the most of the negotiations of access that you made. But also consider stories of randomness, emotions, and feelings, a place you just like, you ended up to. A key matter is not only to access to a field site, but to be able to come back and so negotiate immobility. And tracking technologies are reconfiguring the conditions of fieldwork, but not so much the practices and the fact that you are doing fieldwork. And this is a key takeaway for me. It's really interesting to study how you are navigating between long-term monitoring and short-term result-driven research that is quite the system now in academia. So huge thank you to all of the people who participated in my story, who shared their experience either during interviews or fieldwork. Thank you.
Just 2 questions so we don't delay anymore. Anyone? There. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, that was so cool to hear about. You talked about how the theme of sense of adventure varied with researchers. Can you talk more about how that varied between different people?
Yeah, of course. That's a very big topic, but very interesting. I see a generational gap between some generations ago, especially in the 80s, 90s, where researchers were much more devoted to give some of their, I mean, seabird season is like 4 months, 5 months, so they would be able to give this time to do field work on the remote area, not be with their family, for instance, and this would be mostly the case of men that had a family and a wife to take care of the kids, which is not so much the case now because there is more and more women doing field work, and also even with the men I see in the younger generation, they don't want to put a bracket in their life and just spend several months away. So there is, I saw really a gap between the sense of adventure and really wanting to be away from civilization almost for a long time.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, it's really interesting research, thanks.
Thank you.
There's also one there. He was first.
Thank you for the talk. Did anyone give any comments about environmental considerations when it came to either choosing a field site or how they went about doing science in terms of environmental impact or cost of travel?
Yeah, I'm happy you asked this question because that's something I've been publishing about before on Svalbard. So I've worked on the topic of overgrazing. So when you do a geography of field sites, you see hotspots and gaps. And these hotspots, for instance, in Svalbard, were leading to environmental impact because you had a lot of field stations and like sometimes 200 researchers at the same time. So yeah, it's something I've been working about myself, but it's interestingly not something researchers really discuss, and especially reconsidering the environmental impact of going to field work, of taking a plane, of having an impact there with the colony. But I do work, for instance, on the animal welfare and the relationship between the birds and the people. That is also having an evolution, and more people are being really aware and careful of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we now follow with Signe. I'm sorry if I mispronounce it, which will talk about silent bird cliffs.
Hey, is the sound on? Can you hear me? Cool. Maybe. Okay, thanks. So first I would like to acknowledge the co-authors that have been working on this project with me, because this is sort of a very cooperative project. Tycho and Rob, some of you hopefully still know Tycho Anker Nielsen and Rob Barrett. It's some of the old dudes in seabird research, and then I have a communication woman together with me. And I would like to acknowledge the organizing team who actually led a communication project into the tight protocol here. I'm very thankful for that. So just to get started, some of you might know it. I'm Danish. I moved to Norway about 20 years ago, and I instantly fell in love with the country. I mean, some of you might have gone to Norway. It's really beautiful. It's a lot of nature. It's wildlife. There's a lot of seabirds. For me, it was amazing coming from Denmark to Norway. You have these amazing bird cliffs. And this is also the experience that is being sold to people now these days, to tourists coming to Norway, for instance, that this untouched nature that we have in Norway. But where I see something, and people that travel to, for instance, this is Røst in northern Norway, they see this untouched natures. There's still other people that have experienced something else and that just see this as a sad backdrop of something that once was. This is a difference in reference points. It's known as shifting baseline, or the shifting baseline syndrome. It's because we all have our reference point, which is based on what we remember and what we have experienced. And this can make us blind to the long-term changes. You can almost say that there is a memory loss between generations. So as nature changes, our perception of what is normal and natural, it also changes. And this can give us a wrong impression on how profoundly the nature and the world around us has changed. Our our frames of reference has simply been changed. And I think that this goes for many of us. I consider myself a young researcher still. I don't think that maybe applies, but as a seabird researcher, I have given talks a lot of times on the state of the nature and the seabirds in Norway, and I've shown graphs like this, and it is really, really sad. But it's always sort of reduced to numbers and graphs. But what it really means, like deep inside, I don't think that has sort of sunk in. I mean, what is 80% of breeding kittiwakes that have disappeared? It's the total silence of a lot of the bird cliffs in Norway now. And I don't think that I really understood these words until I started working on this project, and I saw some of the old recordings from Runde in central Norway where I do my field work. It's 5,000 shacks on the northern part of Runde that have just disappeared. At the last count this summer, there was 30 pairs left, and none of them got chicks on the wings. It's 100,000 of pairs of kittiwakes that are gone. It's silent. You come to Runde and you expect something, and it's silent. You have gannets, you have the great skuas, but you don't have the sound of the kittiwakes. And I think that the challenge is that this blindness can lead to a lack of action, that people, they accept it because they don't know how it used to be. People, they go to Runde and they think it's amazing. This is from Syldefjord, so it's not Runde, but they think it's amazing. The tourists go there a lot, and they're really, really excited about it. So I think that it's really crucial to collate this information in the past to help people get their perspectives right on how this was and to fit this into the future management, because we shouldn't manage what we have today, but we should strive to go back to what it was. And I think all of us in here, we have an important role in giving people the insight which enables them to reset their baselines in a way. So I would really recommend people to go back and look in their drawers and find some of these old photos and try to see what does it look like today. Through this project, I've worked together with a lot of photographers and researchers and the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation to collate these old images and film clips. And I have also had the pleasure of talking with a lot of, or not a lot, but some old and retired researchers and documenting their stories. So I have hours of interviews with this is Rob and Tuku, who was part of the project, and them telling how their experience of the field sites, the bird cliffs, were when they got there 60 years ago for the first time. I also got in touch, or I cooperated with the Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation about making a photo story, which they have shared. And at the last check, it was 300,000 people that had read this story. And I think that an important take-home message is how big a role we can play in communicating out that work that we're doing and the patterns that we are seeing. A lot of people are doing an amazing job now, so I'm not saying that people are not doing it, but I think we should really keep it in mind that we go out to amazing places and we have a lot of knowledge, and we need to share that out to make a difference. And just to get a bit personal, because I think that maybe sometimes that's good, I've spent the last 1.5 years on and off collecting old images and talking to people and looking at a lot of old clips of how things were. And it's been really difficult, and it's been really emotional. It's both as a researcher, as a human, and as a mother of 2 amazing kids. Because I can see the extent of the changes, and a lot of the changes I wasn't aware of it emotionally before I started this. And for me, I think it can be difficult to stay optimistic and to keep the hope that we can turn this around. And I know that there's quite a lot of this talk about eco-grief and eco-depression. And for me, that has been a part of everyday research life because it can be so paralyzing that we see all the things happening around us, and it's so difficult to face. But at the same time, there's so much to fight for, and being here together with all of you is amazing. And I know that things are happening and people are pulling in the same direction. So my hope is that even though academia can be tough and it's really competitive, we have this dilemma in a way, I hope that we can all work together towards pulling in the right direction, the same direction, where the ultimate goal is to protect nature around us. I will just round off with a clip from Sverre Fjeldstad. He's a Norwegian commentator. He's like the Norwegian David Attenborough. And he passed away this spring. I was in touch with him before he died and got the permission to use some of his old clips. And for me, that sort of put it into perspective, this thing that we need to act now to get hold of some of these old images, because people are sadly sought to pass away.
Hvis vi tar runde i sin helhet, så tror jeg at vi trygt kan si at det finnes ca. 1 million fugler her. Og dermed er Runde millionbyen i havet.
And with that, I would like to thank for your attention.
Well, thank you. Well, now, thanks to your short presentation, we have a little more time, so we can ask some questions if you want. Can you repeat, please?
What is the main reason of all these declines in Norway?
Oh, God, that's a difficult question. I mean, that's what all of you guys are working on. No, it's complicated. It's a lot of different factors acting together. It's related to food, the availability of food around the colony, combined with, for instance, predation. When there's less food around, for the kittiwake, for instance, you see that they spend longer time trying to get food, and then the predators can access the colony. We've had an increase in the white-tailed eagle. So it's a combination of a lot of things, competition with fisheries. Yeah, it's sort of the whole. It's not one clear answer, unfortunately. That would have been so easy.
My question was, do you have pictures to show the reverse thing, like empty fleets that are now fully birds?
Yes, that's a good story. Yeah, we have that, and I'm sort of, I was really, like there's also the success stories, so I think we can also tell the success stories, and we can tell the stories of birds expanding. Like I have a collection of photos from the gannets in Norway that are expanded northwards and have established on Bjørnøya. And I don't know if that's good news or bad news. That's because they are now getting, like having a habitat around Bjørnøya where they can establish because of warming oceans, probably. So yes, I have both, and I think you can use it both in the positive and the negative way. And I think it's important to remember the positive, because there are like success stories of birds returning.
Thank you. That was really interesting. Just a different perspective on everything. I'm just interested in what your hope or your vision is for your work.
For this work, or for
for the next few years, I suppose. What do you hope to achieve?
It's sort of doubled. I mean, I'm a researcher, so I'm doing research too. But I think that my hope is that we can set things into perspective and communicate. That it's not, I mean, on Runde we had an increase in 3% in the population of puffins, but that still means that we have a third of the number of puffins that we had 40 years ago. So it's sort of putting things a bit into perspective, that we can use these communication tools to put the world around us into perspective. And for me, it also gives me a motivation to work towards something, because we should try to achieve some of these things at least.
Any more questions?
Thanks, Signe. I mean, a photo tells 1,000 times more powerful a message than a graph, and I was wondering, therefore, what traction you can get with this inside Norway and elsewhere, perhaps with government agencies, conservation agencies, to build towards some possible solutions for these birds?
Yeah. I was just checking if the environmental directorate from Norway was present in the... No, things. Norway's, in a way, we're fortunate in Norway because we have quite a lot of financing for research. So we're researching into what some of the drivers are. So there are things happening, but we're still waiting for an action plan for seabirds. We've been waiting for the last 7 years for an action plan for seabirds to actually try to look at some of the things we can implement to make it better for the seabirds, for instance. So things are moving really slowly, but I think that stories like that and other stories about seabirds, that gets it into the public attention, and when it gets public attention, then you can start to get the political change, maybe.
Thanks. That's it. Well, now to end the day with a speed talk by Martin about shipping disturbance on common scooters. Here.
Yeah, okay, thanks a lot. Yeah, 5 minutes for also can be quite big story. I find it very inspiring. So this is a talk actually about, well, something to do about nature protection. So I thought to put what we found in the title, so at least you know my message. So intensive shipping disturbance pushes common scoters around and away from their food in the main Dutch staging area in spring. This is a story based on what we have seen from airplane. Already for quite some time, for more than 10 years, we have done a study here in the northern part of the Netherlands. This is the shallow coastal zone of the Wadden Islands. It's a Nature 2000 area, and one of the species occurring there with a couple of 10,000s of birds is common scoter, but also red-throated diver, other species which are protected in this area. As an introduction, I don't know how everyone is familiar with common scoters. They eat these very tiny, small shellfish. They are hidden in the bottom, and the birds dive up to 20 meters, and they swallow the shells in, and then the shells are crushed in the gizzard. So these birds must have a high energy demand to dive in this also in these waters with high tidal currents, etc. And this is their main prey, Spisula. So the trend of the main food of the species. And as you can see, in the 90s, there was a certain amount of available food for the species. Then it disappeared. Interesting story in itself, because of dominance also of an exotic species. But then recently, it came back. Here are the numbers in this area, the study area. The main gray bar is the coastal zone I'm talking about. And from a policy perspective, there are target numbers set. And for this area, there should be around 70,000 birds there. So they should be protected in that area. But of course, that's a minimal number. Another thing about the common scoters is, and that's well known, also studied actually in the main wintering area. You saw that we have about 80,000 birds in north of the Netherlands, but the main wintering areas are around Denmark and the Baltic Sea. And the species is very sensitive for shipping. Probably it's because of the underwater sound. And this is an experimental study. So you can see that the common scoter flies off at a median distance about 800 meters. These are the data we are working with. So what we wanted to do is making a species habitat model based on a time series of this period, and then relate this kind of data with all the other, for food availability, but also the disturbance, depth. So here are the ducks, which we gridded to do the analysis. Here's the depth. Not only Spisula, but there are also other tiny small shellfish which can be eaten by the birds. And the ships, which are also active in this Nature 2000 area. And one of the main factors is, there is a management plan. There's quite some intensive fishing there, mainly shrimp fishes, but also shellfish fishery. So of course that's also evaluated in terms of food availability for the ducks. So there's some kind of management plan, and then to keep that all in balance. Well, it's quite late. I will not explain completely this hurdle model, but it's, I will only tell you the final outcomes of the analysis we did based on this gridding of all these data. So there is some optimal occurrence of the scoters related to depth. But now, this was surprising to us. We thought to find a very negative relationship with disturbance, but we did not find it. And more surprisingly, I find any relationship with food. So then we went back to the data and also what we have experienced in the field. The green dots is just one survey, one of the surveys. You can see the orange dotted line, that's the track of the airplane. Such a count takes 4.5 hours. And the red dots are the fishing vessels. And to help the eye, so we knew there is disturbance there. Why don't we find it? So this is of course a very static image. And also from the airplane, we have seen all these waving flocks flying around, disturbed by the fishing vessels. Well, this is a view from the airplane, and this is how it looks like. So here you see a fleet of 5 fishing vessels, and they are moving around. So this whole area is now not available for the scoters. And so here, from the same ships, from the same count, we also have this really AIS data. So it's a radar track. So you can see that they really clear off this Nature 2000 area. Really at some days, scoters move around and really out of the area. And you can do some calculations with that. So if you take this 800 meter of flushing distance we knew from the German study, and the speed of the ships. So with a fleet of 50 ships in the area, you easily almost clear off the whole area. So then we went back to the data again, and this is IIS avoidance distance with ships and individual flocks. And this is just a trick, because this is just an introduction for one of the posters. It's over there. And you can ask Peter van Horst who did this analysis, so he's sitting there. So now we come to the practical side. At the moment, from the Dutch government, there is a so-called North Sea Agreement. And because of all these wind farm plans, also other issues are tackled now. So at the moment, there is a process going on to see whether it's possible, together with the nature organizations and the fishermen, to really get a disturbance-free area in the Nature 2000 area, because this protection is just on paper. So some positive steps are taken. And what we are doing, we have, based on the number of years with more than 100 Spisula, concentration areas have been designated or identified And so together with the fishermen, we are trying to get that they are themselves, together with the nature organizations, come up with a plan, and also with, of course, a lot of practicalities are there. This picture I show you that it's not only birds, it's also something is happening on the bottom, as you can see. So more specialists are involved to come up with a very good management plan with more protection, hopefully, for the nature in the Dutch coastal zone. That's my story.
So, just to keep on track, just 2 questions. Anyone? No? Well,
I thought so.
well, then this ends this section.